Prime Minister of Jamaica wants global plan for sustainable recovery post-pandemic. CXC establishes independent team to review recent exam results. Barbados Prime Minister wants tourism workers to have priority access to COVID-19 vaccine. And there will be no Carnival in Trinidad and Tobago next year. These and other stories are in this week's edition of CARICOM NewsTime. I am Michelle Nurse. Thanks for joining us. Prime Minister Andrew Holness of Jamaica says the world needs a plan for sustainable recovery after the pandemic, as he pointed out that survival depended on managing COVID-19. The Prime Minister recommended a plan that's as innovative, ambitious, and impactful as the Marshall Plan was to Europe after World War II. He made the remarks on the 29th of September during a high-level meeting on financing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in the era of COVID-19 and beyond. Prime Minister Holness and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres were the co-conveners of Tuesday's high-level meeting.
As we adopt the language of the IMF Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, to build forward stronger, we must be bold, creative, and optimistic about the future. We can use the global financial system as a force multiplier. We must, however, ensure that we target support and recovery at all levels, nationally and globally, and acknowledge that the need for action is particularly acute in relation to developing countries, which are the most vulnerable. Indeed, until every country recovers, there can be no greener, smarter, stronger, and more equitable global recovery.
Prime Minister Holness said heads of government will consider an impressive menu of concrete measures that were drawn up by critical focus groups.
The measures we will take are designed to stimulate the flows of private investment, spur the creation of decent jobs, lower the transaction cost of remittances, lay the foundations for a green, inclusive, and resilient recovery, provide liquidity to developing countries with limited fiscal space, address debt vulnerability, increase our engagement with the private sector, and collaborate with other international entities to prevent illicit financial flows.
The objective of the high-level forum was to create buy-in at the highest political level to mount an ambitious and coordinated international effort that is commensurate with the magnitude of the crisis. As the pandemic continues to affect the Caribbean's tourism industry, Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley wants priority access for the region's tourism and hospitality workers when a COVID-19 vaccine becomes available. She made the recommendation at a meeting of the Pan American Health Organization's Directing Council that was held late September. The meeting addressed critical health challenges facing the region amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
But as a co-chair of the FCCA America's Cruise Task Force, I have listened to colleagues across the region who are desperately calling for a safe restart to cruise tourism. As one of the most tourism and travel-dependent regions of the world, and therefore the region whose economies have come to a screeching halt with zero revenue, we have to find a way to jumpstart our economies. But it must be done in such a way so as to ensure the safety of our workers. I want to repeat myself. It must be done in such a way as to ensure the safety of our workers. It is for this reason that I've been advocating that the workers in the tourism and travel sector be given priority access to vaccinations and to therapeutics when they are fully available. This will allow thousands of our workers to get back to work safely in this hemisphere and to get our almost dormant economies awake again. I look forward to your cooperation, therefore, in this institution in helping us to make this call for so many of our countries that are literally affected by absence of travel and tourism activity.
Prime Minister Motley used the opportunity to also call for a restructured global financial regime to cater more to small states, which the pandemic has profoundly impacted.
That I'm fighting to hold back in Barbados. We welcome the effect of COVID-19 in bringing a growing realization to the world. The global financial system must be restructured and indeed revolutionized and democratized. Only in this way can vulnerable subregions like our own Caribbean community escape the prison of the false per capita based middle income categorization, which is blocking us from receiving much needed financial aid while penalizing our efforts at creating sustainable national economies. We refrain from settling on more appropriate proxies like a vulnerability index that will better measure our capacity to absorb shocks like this and our capacity to be able to respond to them. Equally, we continue to use raw and imprecise proxies.
An independent team will shortly begin reviewing and possibly revising grades that the Caribbean Examinations Council recently awarded students, says Chairman of CXC, Professor Hilary Beckles. The chairman says each and every formal reported case will be reviewed, and where remedies are required, they will be applied. The announcement came against the background of allegations that flawed procedures and systems were used to arrive at grades for this year's Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate and Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Examinations, which were administered in July. Ministries of Education joined teachers, students, and parents from several CARICOM member states in expressing their dissatisfaction with the results of the examinations, which were released in September. In the face of the disruptions in the education sector that were caused by the pandemic, CXC used a modified approach of multiple choice plus school-based assessments or alternatives to school-based assessments. CXC had given the assurance that the grades this year will be valid, equivalent, fair, and of equal status to grades awarded in previous years. While praising CXC for administering the examinations during the pandemic, Professor Beckles points out that the concerns that were raised are of great importance to the organization and that maintaining public trust is paramount. CXC Registrar Dr. Wayne Wesley says the organization is committed to serving the people and to the development of the region. Energy was the focus of a special ministerial meeting of the Council for Trade and Economic Development held on the 30th of September. Dr. Devon Gardner, Program Manager for Energy at the CARICOM Secretariat, fills us in on the outcomes of the day-long meeting, which included a special strategic session on working towards energy security.
We really went into a lot of detailed discussions around some matters related to integrated resource and resilience planning, we call it, which is really an emerging way of doing electricity sector planning, something that's relatively new globally, not just to the Caribbean. But what it does is it allows us to understand not just the different resource options, renewable and otherwise, that are necessary for us to meet our electricity needs, and also what kind of electricity demand it is from the customer side. Also, it allows us to figure out how to most realistically create the kind of system that allows the demand to be served by the resource options that are available, and critically, how to build in the resilience requirements so that the system is more robust against any kind of external shock, so that those shocks are weather-based shocks, climate-based shocks, or whether they are epidemiologically. Also, another key outcome was really around the strategic sessions, really where we had a significant amount of agreement around what regional energy security potentially could look like, and agreement around the fact that we will establish a group to immediately begin working on developing a regional energy security strategy, focusing to a large extent on regional energy integration matters, and coming back to the COTED with something for them to approve that will give the details of regional energy security and cooperation.
There'll be no carnival in Trinidad and Tobago next year. That's the word from Prime Minister Keith Rowley.
That unless there's some dramatic wind that will blow across us, whereby Christmas pandemic would have been a thing of the past, Carnival in Trinidad and Tobago in 2021 is not on. Picture Juve morning, but with the coronavirus still a major issue, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but in the world around us. It's just not on. Let us be thankful that we are still alive to see each other's face. Let us remember what our country passed through in 1918. Let us understand what is happening in countries abroad that have not been able to control the spread among its population. And in those examinations and review, a carnival, which is the perfect environment for the spreading of the virus, is not something that we can countenance at this time. This decision, I know, would have serious economic knock-on effects, things that we would lose in terms of the economy. But by the same token, we can't hope to gain on that swing and die on the merry-go-round.
It's a tough decision, but one that is generally understood and accepted in our current circumstances. Safety and health first. As one Trinbagonian said, we've enjoyed Carnival in the past, and there will be many more in the future. For these and other stories, visit the CARICOM website at caricom.org or the CARICOM news site at today.caricom.org. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please continue to be safe and see you next time.